Romero's Dead films are some of the most culturally significant, socially conscious, and transcendent films from cinema. They're the films that started the career of a unique filmmaker, and also its final installment became the director's last film. From bringing in a new horror icon in the zombie and helping to allow the horror genre to become more accessible and approachable to audiences, as well as allowing more graphic depictions of violence and horror for its audience. But without further ado, let's get into these films. Night of the Living Dead is a 1968 horror film written and directed by George A. Romero. The film follows a group of people who hole up in a house as they're surrounded by a swarm of undead people who feast on human flesh. It's a film that I knew I was going to love before I'd even seen it because it has two things I love. I'm a big fan of horror films, and it mostly places itself in one location, which I love in films, as it really aids to help center the film in one situation. The film helps set a new precedent in the horror genre, as it's one of the first low-budget horror films that grossed hundreds of times its budget, to lead other films to break box office records like The Blair Witch and Paranormal Activity. It also gave us possibly the newest addition to the classic horror characters with the addition of the zombie. Other types of zombies had existed before this film, but I think it set the precedent for what a zombie is for the future of pop culture. The ripples this film created in the genre can still be felt today, and there are so many films that owe their success to the past that this film opened up. The film was shot in black and white, and it works both atmospherically, but also helps to hide some of the shortcomings and mistakes made during the filming of this movie. Being low budget, the chance of making mistakes is increased, and there are some noticeable ones in this film with certain shots out of focus, a couple of acting moments that are off, which could have been due to a lack of extra film to get enough takes, as well as continuity issues. But these feel so minuscule as an issue considering how much this film does well, with its pitch-perfect escalation of threat, and the growing inner conflict occurring between our main character Ben and Harry Cooper, our secondary antagonist behind the zombies. The film acts as a study of how different people and sects of society would react to an external threat. Ben acts as our moral center, and his simple solutions and quick wits and steadfast resilience to any ideas that could threaten the group. Harry is self-centered and is always looking out for number one, and even when he seems to be helping the group, there is always a sense that he could betray the group to protect his own well-being as well as his family's. The film is rich with its themes and subtext, even if many weren't intentional. It's very hard not to link the subtext, as it feels so integral to the story. The constant attempts of one-upmanship and the attempts of displaying one's masculinity is throughout this film, and how toxic masculinity becomes one of the factors that leads to the breaking down of the group. Harry hates to feel undermined and being told what to do by another man, as he has never been opposed, as his young daughter and wife are both subservient to him and look up to him for guidance. And then to be upstaged by another man in front of his family is something his ego can't take, and this is what leads to the breaking down of the camaraderie and social preservation of the group. Additionally, with the film being released during a time where major strides were being made with the civil rights movement, the themes of race and racism seem to be unavoidable with this film, even though Romero has stated that race never came as a factor when auditioning for Ben, and simply chose Dwayne Jones as he was the best actor for the job. But the links to racism can still be seen, with being one of the reasons why Harry doesn't respect Ben is because he has this feeling that Ben isn't equal and should be considered below him. The ending of the film, which I will be spoiling here, so skip to this time code if you haven't seen the film, but the killing of Ben at the end of the film by accident, assuming him to be a zombie, has some visual connections to the assassinations of civil rights activists Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, as well as to equate the black man in America at this time to be the same as these mindless roaming creatures with no higher brain function, which obviously is seen to not be true. The film, by today's standards, considering how far the envelope of what can be shown on screen is being widened year after year by horror films, there are still moments in this film that can give very strong and volatile reactions. The previously mentioned ending of this film with the death of Ben leaves a lump in your throat and is brilliantly subversive. The deaths of Tom and Judy, two other survivors, is bleak and shot so matter-of-factly, and the turning of Harry and Helen's daughter Karen is frightening and so dark in how she murders her mother, and her screams echo and distort in ways that just make your skin crawl. can't imagine how impactful this must have been for an audience in 1968, as there have been horror films before this movie like Psycho and The Haunting, but this film showed horrifying acts on screen, such as a young girl eating the dead corpse of her mother with this blank expression on her face, which is certainly something that would stick with an audience. Night of the Living Dead was a game changer for the horror genre, and showed that this genre could be popular and profitable, opened the door for violence to be more acceptable, and helped place George A. Romero on the world stage and show what he could do with a larger budget, and show what he could do he did. After the release of Night of the Living Dead, Romero made a further 4 feature films. There's Always Vanilla, a romantic comedy in 1971, Season of the Witch, a drama in 1973, The Crazies, a science fiction horror in 1973, and Martin, a psychological horror in 1978. None of these films had the critical or commercial success of Night of the Living Dead, but Martin was notable for being the first collaboration between director George A. Romero and special effects and makeup artist Tom Savini, who he'd work with again on his next installment in the Dead franchise, 1978's Dawn of the Dead. A decade after the release of Night of the Living Dead, Romero returned to the monsters that started his career, but this time with a considerably larger budget of $1.5 million for Dawn compared to the measly $148,000 for Night of the Living Dead. In this film, Romero took elements from Night of the Living Dead and expanded and got more creative with his visuals, locations, and violence. The film begins with the outbreak of the zombies and follows 4 main characters: Roger and Peter, 2 SWAT team members, and Stephen and Francine, 2 TV staff members who hole up in a mall to protect themselves from the flesh eaters and whoever else may cause them harm. The film definitely is an escalation from the previous film in scope, as we see that the zombies have infected larger population areas thanks to a news broadcast, and then we meet Roger and Peter as they are helping to evacuate a tower block full of zombies, and then we see a larger and larger swarms of them when they make their way to the mall as it is full of zombies. From there, the film acts as a what to do when the zombie apocalypse occurs, as we follow the group as they herd out the zombies, lock them out, and then store up all their water and food. But the film also deals with the aftermath of survival and how they try and fill their time as they are no longer burdened by a job or a mortgage or social interactions and are just waiting for the world to go back to normal, as they can't do anything to change it. However, this new equilibrium is broken when a biker gang rolls into town, led by Tom Savini, who breaks into the mall and begins to raid it, but also haphazardly allows zombies to swarm in and the place turns into chaos. The film in its third act just goes balls to the wall with the bikers wreaking havoc as zombies are shot and thrown off balconies and have pies thrown in their face, and even one of the bikers is killed while using a blood pressure machine. This is also where the film's issues start to come out, such as the makeup on the zombies that is really well done when there are only a few zombies on screen, but when there are larger swarms there seems that there was a lack of time before shooting for the makeup crew, as many of them are just slightly grey and there isn't a clear continuity of how the zombies look. But this is something that was improved with the next film, and here it seems like it was due to a lack of budget and time, and this isn't surprising considering the budget, though bigger, still isn't that large for a film with this kind of scale. You can also tell that this film was definitely made in the edit, as there is a very loose feel to the film, and its pacing where they likely filmed as much coverage as they could for each scene, and then from there they worked what the film was in the editing bay. The comedy the film has is also another interesting choice to bring into the film, and it both does and doesn't work in the film. There are some great moments, such as when they have finished barricading the mall and are safe, we get this great montage where they spend their time trying to entertain themselves, but when the threat of the zombies returns it feels odd that the humour stays with the film. It is hard to find the zombies scary when there are sequences where they are having pies thrown in their faces and are easily avoided by numerous people. But the film also has some great commentary on the growing commercialization of the US during the 70s and then into the 80s, and the excess which is expressed through the use of the mall as a haven for commercialization. It's something that transcends that of humanity and stands as an unwavering element of American society, seen in the film's montage as the survivors indulge in the riches it encases in order to pass the time, and it acts as a distraction to the greater issue that resides outside the mall. It's certainly a film of ups and downs, but it's such an interesting film to watch, to see Romero's return to the genre, and see what he could do furthering this universe with a big budget and a larger scope. Once again, after Dawn of the Dead, Romero took a break from his franchise, and focused on other projects such as Night Riders in 1981, an action drama, and Creepshow, a horror comedy anthology film in 1982. But he returned to cap off his original trilogy of zombie films with 1985's Day of the Dead. Once again, Romero was given a larger budget thanks to Dawn of the Dead, bringing in $66 million on a $1.5 million budget, and for Day of the Dead he had between $3.5 and $4 million to work with. In Day of the Dead, zombies have now overturned the world as they outnumber the remaining survivors. With the world overrun, humanity is being forced underground where tensions are high and a fight for power and control has begun. We follow Dr. Sarah Bauman as she lives underground along with a group of other scientists looking for a cure to the zombie pandemic, protected by a platoon of soldiers who are starting to get stir-crazy as the solution is becoming less and less likely. While underground, one scientist nicknamed Frankenstein has been dissecting and conditioning zombies, finding that some have higher mental capacity and can perform human acts as if they are reverting back to their original state. One of his best performing subjects is a zombie named Bub, who remembers specific commands such as saluting and aiming a weapon. But this doesn't impress the soldiers, and especially Captain Rhodes, who thinks of the zombies as scum and something that should be wiped off the face of the earth. I really like how bleak this film gets, and it's a nice end to this original trilogy, with how dark the world has become, and that there really seems to be no hope left for the future of the planet. In Night of the Living Dead, there is some hope for humanity as we see the small militia triumph over the small number of zombies, and Dawn of the Dead has some humorous and light-hearted moments, but none of this can be seen in Day of the Dead, as it seems they are at the end of their rope, and this is their last-ditch effort to try and survive. The film, also similar to Night of the Living Dead, becomes a microcosm of these differing factions of society, and how when humanity is ripped away from the norms of society, they revert back to their animalistic roots of a struggle for power and a focus on the needs of the individual rather than the survival of the group, and this is something that would echo throughout the rest of Romero's Dead films. The one tiny moment of hope is with the character of Bub and his memory of his life before turning, and how there may be a chance that humans and zombies could possibly coexist, but this is destroyed by the lack of empathy and forethought by Captain Rhodes and his relatable prejudices to those who have eaten people that he has known. The film is also Tom Savini's masterpiece in regards to its makeup and special effects. Each zombie feels tangible and slightly decayed to really show the extent at which this virus has taken over their body, and how long they have been roaming the earth with their tattered and torn clothes and their rotting flesh, which is shown expertly with the shot the title of the film plays over, which helps to tell the audience what kind of film they're in for. Day of the Dead is just another solid film and one of the best trilogies ever made. However, this would be the peak of the franchise, and from here, sadly, it's all downhill. After Day of the Dead, it was 20 years before Romero returned to the zombie genre after a boom in zombie-related content, including 2 remakes of his own films, 1990's Night of the Living Dead by Tom Savini and 2004's Dawn of the Dead by Zack Snyder, as well as films like Return of the Living Dead, Brain Dead, 28 Days Later, and Shaun of the Dead. Thanks to the large success of Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead remake, this 4th installment was greenlit, and in 2005 we got Romero's Land of the Dead. With the world still roaming with zombies, the last of humanity is holed up in a large skyscraper, surrounded by a wall as they try to adjust back to normal society. This new installment was highly anticipated as it brought back the guy who created the modern day zombie back to a genre that has changed with the new millennium, and people were interested in seeing what the father of zombies could do. But what we got was a film that rammed social commentary down your throat for 90 minutes, intercut with some bland characters and some zombie action to keep you somewhat entertained. The previous installments have had social commentary in them, whether it was intended or not, but in those films it was a subtext like social commentary should be, opening up a debate and a discourse rather than explaining the issue to an audience and outwardly stating the problem and why it is a problem. In the skyscraper in which the people live, a class system has been created with those in power in the penthouse suites and those who don't are on the ground living in huts where they can. This return to a classist society is warranted and makes sense for the world of the film, as people would revert back to these norms thanks to those in power choosing to abuse it. However, the film takes it a step further, where those in the penthouse apartments also go shopping and wear fur coats and dinner jackets, and it feels completely absurd considering the bleakness of the outside world. It could work as if it was done satirically, but the film plays it completely straight. The film even goes so far as to have the main villain of the film, Kaufman, played by Dennis Hopper, to have a butler, played by a black man, who has this Uncle Tom style subservience to Kaufman, which comes across so poorly handled it's teetering on offensive.
Hey, easy connection, easy.
Oh, Mr. DeMar, Mr. Kaufman isn't home, and I heard... Dad, I Call security. They should be here.
Yeah.
Almost midnight, sir.
Pack us up, we might be leaving.
In the boat?
I'd rather be taking dead reckoning, but not available.
Let's go. Come on, let's go. Come back, Mr. Kane.
Come back here, you son of a bitch! You got the fucking keys!
I can see what Romero was trying to do, as if to say that the white rich have taken this as an opportunity to make themselves the master race once again, since everyone is dependent on them and those with power have the ability to make anyone subservient to them, and thus the rise of racism has come again. But it's only ever seen with this character, and along with him being one of the only few black characters in the film, and is used to fill in this stereotype from a dark age of racist cinema and society. There are elements of social commentary that I do like in this film, and are done with some semblance of subtlety. For example, like I said before, the classism in parts, particularly the basics of showing the division of class, are well done, even though the film decides to end with Kaufman trying to escape with duffel bags of cash, which wouldn't have much worth in a post-apocalyptic world considering they are social constructs and have no inherent value. But the best parts come through with its use of the zombies. For example, the film has another zombie similar to Bub in Day of the Dead that shows some promise of higher brain function, and actually leads a swarm of zombies to attack the last fortress of humanity. The zombie in question is dressed in a boiler suit and is first seen in a mechanics, so it's some nice commentary about the plight of the working class blue-collar worker, and how at times it can feel like they're being treated like second-class citizens, as the zombies are, and all feel like zombies in their work life for this repetitive 9-to-5 job to survive to the next week of the same old thing. These brief glimpses of the brilliance of Romero and his writing do give you hope throughout the film, because this is such a clever idea and something that feels deeply linked to the zombie genre, with it really kicking off after the global recession and people's meta-commentaries of their own lives, and how some people aren't seen as people but rather just tools to keep the economy going, and making sure that those at the top stay at the top and those at the bottom of the social economic ladder stay at the bottom and hold it steady and reap no rewards. Land of the Dead is plainly a mess, with some great ideas and some god-awful ones as well, but the film was successful enough that Romero got another chance to make another installment, and possibly redeem himself from this previous attempt. However, instead, Romero fell further into a deeper pit and traded out his ham-fisted social commentary for the latest trend in horror, found footage. In 2007, we got Diary of the Dead, which, for a first in Romero's franchise, takes place at the outbreak of a zombie apocalypse, and follows a group of teens shooting a low-budget horror film who encounter a zombie while filming and end up road-tripping across the country looking for some form of protection from the growing threat. The film is shot as a found footage film, but it's also edited and has music running underneath certain scenes. But the film lampshades this at the beginning by stating that this is recovered footage that has been edited together and the music has been added for dramatic effect, and has been released on the internet in order to spread awareness of the threat and to document these events. This is all well and good, and I wouldn't mind this as a premise, as that's kind of interesting, but there are so many scenes in this film that if it were there to document what had happened, they would have been cut, as they have nothing to do with the zombies or show any information about them. This also gives the film a way to explain away why our main character is still filming, as he is doing it to document what's happening, but there's so many sequences where they would have stopped filming, as no matter how much you want to keep shooting, their survival is a bit more important. The film is also full of thin characters who feel like they're just there because the film needs some characters and some people to be eaten, so constructed whatever string of character motivation and plot together in order to get some kills in. The one positive of this film can be seen with its zombie special effects and makeup and some of the inventive kills that the film comes up with, such as its most famous one being dispatched with a defibrillator. The film has potential, as I think it's interesting to bring found footage into this genre, as it could add to the fear, as the zombies would only be seen when the characters can see them, and can lead to some interesting scares and help modernize the genre. But the film falls into many problems of found footage with the lack of internal logic or reason, and the overabundance of shaky camera work to replace genuine moments of fear and tension. I think this one clip can sum up everything you need to know about this film, and its tone, that at times borders on a flat-out comedy that I can't tell if it's intended or is so poorly handled and positioned in this film that it just comes across as funny unintentionally.
Don't mess with Texas.
Being a found footage film and also independently produced, Diary of the Dead had a significantly smaller budget of $2 million, but was able to bring in $5.3 million, and this allowed Romero to make his final installment in his Dead series, 2009's Survival of the Dead. Sadly, this was Romero's final theatrically released film, as he passed away in 2017. But this film is a nice film to end on, with the film itself having this finality to it, and the film's own themes of looking towards the future rather than the past, and trying to make something of what's to come in an unforgiving world. The film tells the story of a group of National Guards who desert their post in order to find some safe haven to wait out the zombie apocalypse. They find out about Plum Island, which seems promising, but upon arrival they end up in the middle of a civil war between two warring Irish families over the control of the island and decision making on what to do with the undead who lie there. This film is very much the black sheep of this franchise, as it feels so different from the others with this western style and this laid back approach to the filmmaking and the characters themselves in the film. The zombies are becoming less and less of an issue, and rather now just a nuisance of the characters, and they are put to the wayside to focus on the issue that have plagued humanity from the beginning, of whose ideologies are aligned correctly and who should the world be governed by. The zombies are just there to be used as toys in the games of these people, of where they should be allowed to live, and if there is still humanity left within them. The debates can also align with someone's beliefs on life and death, where they decide where life ends and maybe these people are still alive as they're still walking around, and whether this infection has killed them and them as a person, or their soul has left their body and what is left is just a husk being controlled by these parasitic infections. These are interesting debates that pop up through the film and can also be compared to the modern day equivalents of pro-life, and are nicely woven into the film through conversations to set up the debate rather than explain it to the audience. I really like this western style of the film, as it's something so different and never something I would expect to work in this genre. But I think it does it so well because this apocalypse is taking humanity back to that kind of world in a technological sense. In the film there isn't the internet, TV or mobile phones, or not much on the island. There are no cars, so everyone rides around on horseback, and the island feels like a time capsule for the time of just being before the turn of the 20th century. Survival of the Dead is my favourite of the second Dead trilogy, as it does something new and takes the series in directions it hasn't gone before, while still having these nice hallmarks of social commentary and the progression and evolution of these zombies. It's a nice bookend to the series that started all the way back in the 60s, and both started and ended the career of one of the most unique horror directors. Given the success of the Dead trilogy, it was a given that at some point the films would be remade. The first of which was in 1990 with the remake of Night of the Living Dead, directed by Tom Savini. This is my personal favourite of the remakes that I have seen, as it takes the original story but puts its own twist on it, so you aren't just watching the same exact film, just updated with a different cast and a bigger budget. As well, in some elements of the film it's an actual improvement on the original. The film gives us a more well-rounded character for Barbara. She is proactive and actively helping the others to defend the house, and at times takes charge. They also put an interesting twist on the classic ending of the original, which has the same feel but takes a different approach that's just as shocking and integral to the film's commentary. In 2004 we got Zack Snyder's remake of Dawn of the Dead, which was wildly successful, making its budget back on opening weekend domestically, and then pulling in over 100 million worldwide. The film is solid, and I like that it chooses this more action-heavy focus throughout the film and really separates itself from the original with its high contrast colour palette and fast pace. I haven't seen either of the remakes of Day of the Dead from 2008 and 2018, but I haven't heard great things about either of them. These films are some of the most interesting films to watch and study because there's so much subtext and context surrounding them, and each feel like a time capsule of where cinema and society as a whole was at the time of its release. Some may not be the best, but they also aren't the worst films out there. Even when Romero was at his worst, he still has this brilliant grasp of cinema and the filmmaking technique. But that's just my opinion. Feel free to place yours in the comments below, and tune in each week for new episodes.